is the one that really sticks out because we, you know,
I told you.
On a visit, I guess it was an early visit, we noticed that on the license plates it said "Je me souviens," which means I will remember. We constructed this whole campaign around that slogan, but what we didn't know was that it was actually the rallying call to the separatist movement in Canada. Our work was misconstrued.
And not just that, actually, we made an American flag, replacing the stars with the fleur-de-lis. Right. So that message became a kind of read as an imperialist comment by the United States against French Canada. And it became a kind of proof of the, I mean, it's sort of what tore us apart was this idea of how the site specificity of the work and the work that was supposed to be emerging from a particular community, that we didn't feel we were limited in what we were saying by the makeup of our identities. That said, as we started to travel in places, and the gulf between our identities and those we were speaking to but grew wider, it became really complicated. And was beyond really actually, I don't know, I mean, to me, it's a lot to do with sort of a very particular moment in the early 90s when so-called identity politics are becoming formulated in a very specific way, and there was a real tug of war within the group, even the notion of the word queer that we now accept, which at the time was a kind of rallying cry, a utopic cry of, you know, the idea that we could all share this word that meant, you know, men, women, different races and classes all occupying the same word. The truth of it was something much more complicated at the time, you know, how queer was being claimed or constituted. So I think it was very parallel in the period of time where we were running aground with how we worked with what was going on in terms of activist community and sort of so-called identity politics in that period of time. I mean, even the famous Whitney Biennial of 1993 that's much pilloried for being a kind of identity politics-based exhibition. So it was in the air in the early 90s in a big way.
I think another project that comes to mind was we were very conscious that access was being flung at us, and we felt responsible to sort of spread it around as we could, and set in motion a series of collaborations, I guess all of which were not that successful, but one of which was with the prostitutes of New York. We did
Pony.
a new Pony. We did a new museum installation. We were invited back, and we did this very tawdry, kind of messy sex shop version of it.
And feathers.
Oh God, I went to the Feather District with Mark, and
wait. Pony of New York is prostitutes of New York.
Yeah, that's what Pony stands for. And so it was sort of one of those uncomfortable moments where you really want to. We couldn't transport our collectivity onto a new collective, and we frequently lost our sea legs when we tried to do that. And there were some of us there was something really great about that project, but it was messy, to say the least.
The meetings were fun.
Well, how about the Gorilla Girl meeting?
Gorilla
Non-starter.
We tried for weeks. We had consistent meetings with the Gorilla Girls. We were determined that we were going to do a collaboration, Grand Fury and the Gorilla Girls. First of all, it's extremely upsetting because, like, you work, the way we worked was extremely visceral. It was very, like, spontaneous. People would say something, people would shout them down, people would say something else, then you would laugh at something. It was very vivacious. When you're sitting across from 4 people in gorilla masks who are named like Frida Kahlo, Call Me Gertrude.
Right.
It just like loses the kind of visceral communication thing.
I think we function in a very familiar way. We're on our best behavior here, but there was a lot of screaming and lunging across tables, and it was really hard to do with gorillas.
Yeah, it was ironic because it was one quote unquote anonymous collective meeting another anonymous collective, you know, and so when they walked in, we just sort of had a response like, what the
anonymous?
They were super. I still don't know who we met with.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
I do.
I know.
But in terms of your question, Andrew, I think that the piece that I think that we could have redone happily is what we call the Grand Fury eye test.
The eye test.
Which is, we did for the, is it the Millennium Show for? Yes, the Millennium Show for
it was for the Decade Show.
Oh, the Decade Show. Okay, with the Whitney, was it? Anyway, we did. Right. We did a subway card, which was an ad that looked like an ad. It had a beach on it. You can see it in the catalog. It had a beach scene on it. It went up actually in the wintertime. And it talked about AIDS and homophobia and sexism and racism and stuff.
Well,
like
just
that.
on that note, just to make it a little more considered than like it had a beach on it. It was located in the subway in this square place where during that period of time, lots of travel agencies and airlines were advertising like winter getaways. So it was lots, you were used to seeing a beach in that square. So it wasn't just some random like, let's put a beach on it. Okay.
No, we actually had to pick the it's Grand Fury, we had to pick the correct beach. So, and the text was talking about AIDS, and it was actually very interesting. I mean, I spent a good chunk of time on the subways when I would find one of the cards, just sitting there watching people's responses to it. And we had problems with the text of it. I think was the biggest problem we had about what we said, and not the idea behind it, but how we said it.
Some of us did. I didn't have so much trouble with that, but it was completely unreadable.
Yeah.
Beyond the readability, I think there were some that suffered from what some of the work suffered from, which were these kind of rallying cries that tried to address every potential audience member. So the tagline of that was, AIDS isn't over for anyone till it's over for everyone, which in theory is fine, but what we outlined in the text was such a kind of, it was like basically we were saying every single thing in society has to change before AIDS will end. That's nice, but everything in society is not going to change. And the work I think that was most effective that we did tended to either be work that took the grammar of advertising and used, that could be boiled down to just language. Men use condoms or beat it. Where it's both funny, it's an active message, it's a direct action, or where we're quoting in a kind of highlighting the context of something that was said of a public figure. So when we're, whether it being thank God for AIDS, worn by a skinhead girl celebrating her own unconsidered homophobia, or whether it was a politician or a public figure who was quoted, and that just the reiteration of those kind of things, and that was a big gesture of the work of sort of a backed up that we really inherited from the group itself, because this idea of the name of the first group showed, Let the Record Show, the installation that was done in the museum. That approach, I think, was continued to be effective, and I think it's actually some of the stuff that I personally find shocking still in the work when you have those direct quotes from Jesse Helms, or when you have a direct quote from the guy from Hoffman and Roach. They stand the test of time because they are just putting into the public record something that was said. Where we try to make these rallying cries, we were, I think, less effective because they weren't tied to something really specific, and they were talking about the fact that yes, many things in the culture were really screwed up. Where do we begin?
I think we're not letting you ask any questions. I think that something else that comes to mind, I know this is like a grand theory,
except we're nice
with microphones. We did have these. We got caught in these kind of snotty art world sissy fights. And sometimes it was very intentional. For the art form piece, we intentionally used Annie Leibowitz's picture of Jesse Helms without asking her permission, because we were sort of opening the door for other people. It was a throwdown. We were opening the door for other people to up what they were saying and doing. And that was part of the Benetton ad. We sort of were forcing their hand, and in fact it led to them approaching us to do something which we then didn't do. So we did sort of, and the New York Crimes thing, I have a slightly expanded version of Tom's. We considered what it would mean to have the New York Times come after us, and decided that that really wasn't what we were trying to do. We really just wanted to say what the New York Times wasn't saying, and that was the objective. And this happened in the shadow of CISPAS, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, had just done a fake New York Times a few months before we did ours, and they were sued by the New York Times. So I had a conversation with one of them, and we talked about it, and we brought it back to the group, and it was a very conscious decision to not enter into that particular mess. So I think we sort of, actually the more we talk about it, the more I realize we were very conscious of what we were doing.